Hello, I'm Doug Benedict, and welcome to the Butler Esports interview series, where we're interviewing sports leaders, owners, and industry experts in the evolving world of esports. Today's interview is with Chris Schneider. Chris is a graduate of Bowling Green State University, where he studied sports management. He also received a master's in sports administration from Ohio State University. Chris has vast experience in athletics, with roles ranging from assistant director of championships with the NCAA to senior associate athletic director at Ohio State, and now as the senior associate commissioner of sports administration and championships with the Big East Conference. Thank you for joining us, Chris.
Hey, thanks for having me, Doug.
Of course. Quite a mouthful, all of your titles there. So how did you get started professionally? How did you get into this world?
Sure. I grew up in Cincinnati, as I mentioned before, and was a huge sports fan. And I learned that Bowling Green State University had a sport management program. And so at a very young age, I was surprised to learn that people could actually get jobs and work in sports. And as soon as I learned that they had that program, I was set. But my goal originally was to work in professional sports. I thought baseball was where I wanted to be. And it wasn't until I got to Bowling Green and had an opportunity to work within their athletic department that I got to see what college athletics was about. And really, I gained a very strong understanding of the student athlete experience. I was helping operate events and basketball games that the community was coming out to enjoy. With my classmates. So I would see these students, in my classes, and then I'd see them on the basketball court as well. So I really fell in love with the whole idea of college athletics and the experience that it provides to not just the student athletes, but also the general student community. And that's when I fell in love with the college athletic side of things.
So do you have some highlights from, your work at OSU or the NCAA?
I've got some, I've been a part of great championship experiences. When I was at the NCAA, I ran 6 different national championships every year. And there was nothing like being either on the pool deck for a water polo national championship, at the ice or a hockey rink for hockey national championship, out at tennis events, to see student athletes who realistically, for the most part, that was the last time they were going to play their sport that they love, because they weren't really going to go professional afterwards. That was their culmination of their career. And to be a part of that was an incredibly special experience. But then to look on the other side, to look and see those student athletes that just lost the last experience was heartbreaking. And I never lost that feel, because you really get an understanding of what students put into their passion to participate in sports. And that was an incredible experience. But the one story that I usually end up telling is one of my favorite experiences didn't actually occur on a court. It had to do with a student athlete who, upon graduation, just a couple weeks before graduation, fell ill, and he was a first-generation student. His family had traveled in from around the world to see him graduate, and he wasn't going to be able to graduate with his class. So we actually arranged the president of Ohio State University to confer his degree in his hospital room with his family the morning of graduation. So we actually got to do that whole experience. And it was the connections that I made working within athletics that allowed us to do that for him.
That's awesome. So how did you find your way to the Big East?
It was a great opportunity. I joined the Big East staff in 2013 when a lot of the conference alignment had changed. So I had followed that while I was at Ohio State. And essentially, the Big East, 7 original members pulled out. They added 3 new members, Butler, Xavier, and Creighton, joined the league in 2013. And they essentially started from scratch. The only thing that Commissioner Ackerman had at the time was the arrangement at Madison Square Garden for the basketball tournaments and, the logo. So it was a great opportunity to join her team and really work with these outstanding institutions and kind of start from scratch. And I think we've done a great job, if I do say so, myself, since joining in 2013.
So esports, the reason we're doing all of this, what is kind of like the vision at the Big East for esports, if that makes sense?
Sure. Esports it's an interesting thing for us to talk about, because it's one of those other duties as assigned as to how I got involved with it. It really started as a presidential directive. I think everybody in the industry had been watching what was going on professionally with esports over the last 4 or 5 years, and really watching that growth. And we all read about the growth in viewership, the growth in numbers, obviously sponsorship dollars was a big thing. And so several of our presidents asked us to just take a look at it. And that was our initial, evaluation, was really just a year of trying to figure out what esports was. And could there be a place for the Big East and more importantly, our institutions to be in the esports space? So we spent a year doing research and then trying to figure out if our schools were even interested. And we did find a lot of support. And so we just tried to see how could we put them together, kind of like what we do in traditional sports. And it's been a great experience so far. It's been rocky because there's not a lot of structures out there that directly relate to how we operate traditional sports. But I think we've done a pretty good job in kind of getting the schools together, getting everybody thinking about esports. And I think what really excites us most is that continued growth and the collaboration between all of our schools. Right now within esports, all of our programs are working well together. I think everybody wants to learn from each other and help each other grow.
So other duties is assigned, right? What are your responsibilities within the organization? What does your day-to-day look like?
Sure. I have oversight of what we refer to as the Olympic sports. And essentially that's everything except men's and women's basketball. So within the Big East Conference, we run 17 championships each year. And me and my staff are responsible for 15 of the 17. So we handle the regular season responsibilities. So that's scheduling, officiating, all of that, the processes that go into all of the sports for everything except men's and women's basketball. And then we're responsible for the Big East championships in those areas. So we coordinate those. I also serve on our COVID-19 task force. So I work with our medical staffs as well to coordinate all the activities of our conferences. And then I also serve on NCAA committees because the NCAA, as everybody hopefully knows, is membership driven. So I'm currently the chair of the NCAA men's soccer committee. So I have some responsibilities, outside of that area as well.
And back in with the esports, do you work with developers at all? We talked about structure, but when it comes to like governance of this stuff, is there, or at least those lines of communication open?
Yeah, they really are. And that's been, I think, the biggest challenge for us is just trying to figure out how the space operates because it is so drastically different than traditional sports. So I've had an opportunity to engage with some of the developers. I work closely with Riot, as you know, with our engagement in League of Legends. And then we just announced actually yesterday our relationship with EGF, which is a great opportunity for us. And what EGF does for us is it provides that operational support. Because as a conference office, we don't really have the structure and the staffing, that really needs to be in place for this to run successfully. And that's what EGF is able to do for us. So that's primarily where our operations side works. But there have been a lot of conversations. I talk with a lot of colleagues, and I think everybody is still trying to figure out how the space works and how to best work together.
Yeah, absolutely. You said you sat on a COVID-19, your task force there. Overall, of course, it's affected everybody, but like, how has it affected? Obviously, traditional sports, I could make a guess, but your esports operations as well.
I think when it all started back in March, I think there was a pretty much a freeze on everything. I think everybody had to stop and really realize, what does COVID mean to our campuses, our institutions, and how is that going to affect everybody? The great thing about esports is that it's pretty much designed to be done socially distant. I think it's ideal, obviously, at places that have venues and designated spaces to come in and compete together. But esports lends itself to be done socially distant. So really provided a great opportunity for our institutions to continue to engage with students. And I really think that's been the big drive, is using esports as a new way to engage with the students at every institution. And so it's taken us a little bit of time to have every one of our schools kind of get back to having a good understanding of what esports, how that can operate on their campus during the age of COVID. But I think as we're now getting started, we're seeing that they're able to really make it work and really engage with everybody.
Yeah. duties as assigned, right? Esports, getting into it and the research you all did, was there someone or something along the way that gave you advice about getting into it, gave you personally advice, or just gave the Big East personally advice? Right? I guess not personally, but.
Well, it was really interesting because we reached out to all of the organizations that are out there. I investigated NACE. I actually went to one of their conventions, talked with a lot of the staffs there. But really, I think Kurt Melcher at Intersport was really helpful for me. I talked with him many times, and I still do pick up the phone and talk with him to figure out, this is what we're hearing. What are some of the realities? And then, actually, what was helpful was the NCAA when they started looking at this at Esports. Nate Flannery on their staff was pulling together a lot of people from conference offices, from publishers, really getting everybody together to talk about esports to see how it fit. And so I learned a lot from those experiences and from a lot of those people that I was able to interact with. And now it's to the point where whenever we put a release out or get information out about us being involved, then other conferences come and talk to us. And we're able to really just find out how it's working on everybody's campus. It's going to operate a little bit differently, but there are always some similarities that we can all share ideas on.
Yeah. From your standpoint, esports in the collegiate scene, what are the biggest opportunities, I guess, for a conference and then for like a university? Like, why would a university want to do it?
I really think that when you look at everything from a conference perspective, a conference office perspective, it's always about our membership. It's about what is going on our campuses and what programming and how can we help support them. So I think from an esports perspective, it really does provide a new way to engage with students that are engaged in gaming already. And I think that's been the exciting part of it, is to be able to create some more support structures for gaming communities on campuses that are already in existence, but may need a little bit more help. And I think that's what the Big East Conference is able to do. We're able to help provide some structures, provide some framework, but allow our administrators at each program to more fully develop the program itself.
Yeah.
So I think that's a great opportunity. And then if I look down the road, ideally what we would like to see is the exact same expectations that we have for our traditional sport programs, where each campus builds up their program. They get better year after year with ultimate goals of winning national championships. And I think that's what we would like to see, again, down the road, continue to develop, continue to support esports to the point where we're celebrating national champions.
And you spoke to this already, kind of, but last week, you announced, the Riot LOL Big East tournament with Playverses, and then just now, as we spoke, the Rocket League season with EGF. How do those kind of come about with the, I guess I don't want to call them third-party companies, but the operational companies for you? Spoke to the operations.
Sure. The way it typically works is a lot of these companies and organizations will reach out to us once they know that we're involved. And then as a staff, we'll collect information, we'll talk to them, we'll try to vet it. But what we do is we bring these ideas and these concepts and opportunities back to the schools. So we have an eSport administrators board where there's a representative from every one of our institutions. And it's with that group that we share these ideas and concepts. And we went through a presentation process, and ultimately we want to make sure that whoever we're working with has the best interest of our schools in mind, and really will be able to provide the support and the services that they need to have successful esports programs on campus. And that's why after we went through this process over the summer, I think everybody felt very good about what EGF was able to provide us in the past. They hosted the in-person Rocket League championship event here in New York last year. It was a great experience. And so I think all of our schools are very excited to continue moving forward with them and see how we can grow esports together.
And on that point, what do you think the Big East and its partners have gotten right about the whole competition side, whether it be live or online competition of esports?
I think there's a lot that we're continuing to try to get right. Everything so far is still, a learning curve. but what I think is really good about every one of our institutions is their commitment, to making sure that we're able to provide, very good opportunities and a wide variety of opportunities for, students to participate in esports. And I think that's our goal with every one of our seasons. Our goal for this year in particular has been about trying to schedule out as much as we can in advance. Our goal is to line up the spring seasons and get those dates of competitions set so that the students that are participating in know exactly what's going to be happening. And once we're able to accomplish that, then I think it helps us in creating awareness, creating additional exposure for esports programs the further out we know. And I always share with our administrators, my traditional sport experiences. I can have schedules 2 years out so that we know exactly how we're playing. And that's kind of our goal. Is I think I would love for us to get esports that same way.
How do you measure success, I guess, is the next question. But maybe I should reframe it because you spoke about, the goal is to win national championships, right? But do you set out goals just like you spoke about with what you want to get done for success at the beginning of seasons, or is there just a metric that you always go by?
I think we're still to that point where we're evaluating what success looks like. But I'll tell you, I think student engagement is going to be the number one for all of our programs. We want to make sure that we're able to create opportunities, for students to engage with each other. And then I look at it from an operational success. So I've got operational success that I want to look at. And that goes back to kind of the scheduling that I talked about and broadcasting. Can we get those things, lined up and set? And then once that is established, then I think we look at, viewership and exposure. How can we use our social media to really get out there and tell the stories of the students that are participating in esports? Because that ultimately is what I think our goal is. Once we can tell the stories of the students that are participating, we can create awareness. We can let people know that the Big East esports brand, is solid. Then I think that's where ultimately, we're talking about that gets the attention of sponsors. So I think it's not a one quick goal that you can set. I think there are steps that we need to achieve, to really continue moving esports forward.
You just brought up a key word, brand, for me here, which is a perfect segue into the next question. When it comes to colleges creating esports programs and trying to build this brand within their college, I guess from your standpoint, maybe the question isn't how they do it, but how do they better that brand and how do they better, their partnerships and how they look to sponsorships?
For me, I think it all goes back to the storytelling. When you're talking about a brand, you have to be able to give somebody a connection to that. There's one thing when you just put a logo out there. And so if it's just the Big East logo, if I put that out here in New York, initially it's going to be basketball. It's the basketball tournament at Madison Square Garden. That's what it is. We have a Big East esports logo. That's a little bit different. And that's what we need to connect the success stories of, your teams to that logo. And I think that's what really helps build, a specific brand. And I think institutions would do the same thing. Right behind you, you've got a great Butler esports logo. It's got connections to the university. Now we need to make sure that we can get out there and connect stories. And I think that's kind of one of the roles of the Big East is if we can share your stories, connecting our Big East esports brand with your Butler esports brand, then I think that's really where we're going to see that ultimate growth.
So $1 million question, right? That we're asking everyone who comes on here, the next 3 to 5 years in esports, but let me reframe it for you. The next 3 to 5 years of esports at the Big East and the next 3 to 5 years of esports overall. What does it look like to you? Ideally, I guess.
I would say ideally, it looks very much like our traditional sports infrastructure in that we know what titles that we're playing in, and we know our schedules exactly where they are, and we know what our broadcasts look like. And I think that's what our ultimate goal is, because that's what our traditional sports look like. And once that gets put into place, then our focus, I think, then can turn to success of our programs and really growing and sharing that story. So that's where I would ideally like to get us, in the next 3 to 5 years. Hopefully, much sooner. So that would be my goal for that.
Overall, like the entirety of the industry, where do you see it?
On the collegiate side, I think it's going to be very interesting. Right now, COVID is having a significant impact financially on universities across the board. What I think is very interesting and it might be unique about our esports structure and our program is that we're not all housed within athletics. And I think to me, that's a good model because I think it should be up to each institution to determine where they house their esports program. And if they want to have it in athletics, I think it works great. If they want to have it in student affairs or residence life, I think that works great. If they want it in an academic unit, I think that works fine. So from a conference office perspective, I just need to know who we're working with. And that allows us to grow. And I would think that right now, hopefully more conferences are able to take on that type of a consideration, as they're building their structure and not necessarily rely 100% on athletics, especially again, like I mentioned, in light of the current situations in higher education.
So another recent announcement you just made, the Big East University Virtual Education Series. Can you explain what that is, what that looks like, and what the student engagement efforts are there?
Sure. Big East University is a program that was created again as a response to COVID, and it's a way of us trying to use some of the newer technology in interacting with student athletes, but also some of the resources that are on campuses to provide educational programming in kind of a more direct way on what do student athletes need after they graduate from college. So a lot of it's going to be on networking. There's some programming, on financial responsibilities. These are some of the topics that may not be taught in classes, but also how do you use being a student athlete as an opportunity to get a job, because many student athletes don't have the time for internships. So this is something that's kind of supplementing a lot of the academic programming that goes on our campuses. And it's just a new opportunity that we saw as a way to help the students.
Yeah, awesome. So the industry you're in now, right? If there's a student watching who wants to be involved, whether it be on the esports side or traditional sports, what kind of advice would you give, having been there?
Yeah, I always tell people who want to get involved, in this field, and I think it can go to any field, is look and find, the closest, person to you that's connected in that field in one way, and find a way to connect and network, but also if there are volunteer opportunities. I think volunteering and internships are a way to really get a lot of, broad experiences in this particular field, and it also gets you known because working in college athletics, and I think esports is going to be an extremely competitive field, so you're going to need to find a way to stick out, and I think the more networking that you can do, and the more volunteering, getting seen, getting people to know your work ethic, that's going to help you in the long run.
Absolutely. So our last question that we're asking everybody who comes on. You have given us a great perspective on all of this. Who do you think two other people, two other organizations, whatever they may be, would be interesting, would give us a unique perspective like you have that we should reach out to and try and interview?
Well, I would say Kurt Melcher, if you haven't already.
We just talked to him.
Well, all right, there's no one partial credit there. You may want to look at, if you want to talk about it on the collegiate side of things, you could reach out to somebody at the NCAA within their championships and find out how that conversation is going. It's been put on hold, but it was not put away. So I think at some point the NCAA may come back and consider, starting that conversation again, and then potentially talk to another conference office that's doing it. I think the Mid-American Conference has announced that they are also doing esports, but they're doing it in a different structure. And I don't think that there's one way that's the right way to do esports. So it's always good to hear from others. And that's the other thing that I tell people. Conference offices collaborate a lot more than people think. People think that it's a competitive advantage, competitive disadvantage. I talk to every colleague at all 31 Division I conferences. We share ideas, we share concepts. We all want to help each other. So I would definitely consider reaching out to another conference.
Absolutely. Those are great suggestions. been a fantastic interview, but like I said, that was our last question. That's all we have. So thank you, Chris, for your time. Thank you for joining us. Stay safe, stay well. Go Dogs.
Great. Thanks, Doug. It's been a pleasure.